Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Obviously, we're a little bit into this particular process video of the frogs. Um, Doing this one a little bit different. This one's quite a bit longer than my other videos, but it's no less important. So today I'm working on my Surface Book in Sketchbook Pro. I've had the Surface Book for a while, and I've always liked to push technology a little bit, and I have Photoshop installed on many of my other machines, so I didn't really have the license to put Photoshop on this machine. So I decided to use something that I think everybody in the digital world can use because it's free. This is Sketchbook Pro, latest iteration. I've got a bunch of brushes in here, but it's very similar to Photoshop in the painting area. You see with the right hand side that you can work in layers, you can save as a Photoshop file, and I really wanted to push my Surface Book this time on this particular illustration. I didn't combine any layers. I've got layer compositing. I've got different effects. This is just a straight out paint of these two frogs in the wilderness, in the jungle. So the Surface Book that I have is an i5 processor. I believe it's 2.4 gigahertz with 8 gigs of RAM. It's running the latest iteration of Windows 10. And it's a great machine. It's I think the 13.5 or 13.9 inch screen, and I've got the latest pen technology as well, so the lag is almost minimal. I really didn't have any issues at all running Sketchbook Pro on this machine, and it was spectacular in terms of battery life. I probably got maybe 5.5 to 7 hours of heavy painting on this illustration. They say the battery life on these machines is great, up to 10 hours. And I think the newest machine, the Surface Book 2, has upwards of 15 hours, and I believe that. This does not have the dedicated GPU. It's got I don't know what the video RAM on this thing is, probably 1.5 or 1 gigabyte, similar to my Surface Book 3. But it's great. I didn't have any, like I said, didn't have any lag. As you see, as I add layers, as it goes through the process as I go through the process of doing the illustration, I keep adding layer upon layer upon layer. I think I probably ended up with maybe 15 to 20, maybe even more than that, 30 layers in this program, and it saved it, no problem. Didn't really have any issues. And at the same time I was doing this illustration, I also had OBS Studio open, and it was recording at 60 frames a second, doing a screen recording so I could show the video to you guys. The screen on the Surface Book, I believe, is 3000 by 3000 pixels or something like that. Great saturation, really good refresh rate, didn't have any blurring or anything like that when I was doing this piece. And also, when I was doing this piece, I was constantly saving and uploading the video files to my Dropbox, so that was also a taxing element on the on the CPU. And I had mail open, and occasionally I would go on the internet, and it breezed through it with flying colors. The only hang up I have, and this has probably nothing to do with the Surface Pro line, because I've had this particular artifact and anomaly happen on my Surface Pro 3 as well as the Surface Book now, and it's OBS Studio, because I work in both Macintosh and PC environments pretty regularly. I don't really, I have a preference for just day-to-day work. I work on my desktop, Macintosh, but for sketching and stuff like that, I always go back to the Surface line. And the only issue that I have was occasionally you'll see like a green screen kind of pop up, and some of the fragmentation and artifacts that happen with OBS Studio. I'm not sure if it's a fault with the video card system on the Surface Pro line. I'm not really sure what it is, but whenever I save the files and I upload them over to my Mac, there's always that green element. I think it has to do with the sound combined with the video format in the MP4, because I save as MP4. So that being said, Surface, is it a viable machine for doing artwork? I think absolutely. And the reason why is because it is a full computer. It's not a tablet uh, only machine. Now you can run it as a tablet, and it probably does fantastic as that. But I always run mine as a full out PC computer. We have quite a few Surface computers in the family, and the only one that really failed was the Surface RT. We had a Surface RT for probably 6 months, and then the touch feature quit working, and that was after a update from the OS. I think the video, not the video, but the touch driver just stopped loading, and now it has no touch, which really stinks. But at the end of the day, you just plug a mouse into it, and it's still a great machine. These Surface products, I think, are really overlooked a lot of times for artistic machines because you have the iPad Pro, you have the MacBook, you have some of the Lenovo products, and of course Wacom and HP all have great computers that really are solid whenever it comes to creating artwork. But what I really like about the Surface line in particular is the way that the pen interfaces with the with the machine and the screen. There's this little rubber nib on the end of the Intrig stylus that you can change and modify, because whenever you buy the pens, it comes with these little nibs similar to Wacom. You can interchange them out depending on what your preference is, how hard you want the nib to be. They have different references, H, HB, 2H, so on and so forth, similar to pencils. So whenever you're drawing on this really slick surface, that tip gives you resistance, which feels absolutely fantastic. I can't speak enough about that. One of the things that I was really disappointed about, and I've looked this up numerous times just to make sure, I've had the Surface Pro 3 for probably 4 or 5 years. And I purchased that computer secondhand, so I didn't pay full price. And that computer was, golly, I think new, around $1,400, $1,500. And this particular machine probably was running along those lines as well, $1,700. And initial pressure sensitivity, I believe, was 256, and then it went up to just over 1,000. And whenever I got this machine, it was I was under the interpretation that there was a software update that would bring up the level of pressure sensitivity of the pen to over 4,000. And that was significantly better than my Surface Pro 3, because I believe that one is at 256. And I got this machine and I started tooling around with it, and it felt very similar. So then I started doing some investigation, and the pen that it came with was the old style with the clip. So then I went on the Microsoft store, and it said, yeah, get this pen. It'll jack up your pressure sensitivity to over 4,000. There's a software update in 2018 which brings tilt and pressure sensitivity all the way to the Surface Book line, and all the way down to I believe the Surface Pro 4. Here's the little deal that I wasn't too happy about. Even with the software update, this thing only has just over 1,000 levels of pressure sensitivity. And even though that sounds, kind of sad in comparison to, some of the Wacom products that are out there. I know Wacom's all the way up to over 8,000 levels right now, and I think the latest iteration of the Surface Book 2 has over 4,000 levels. So I got this with the hope that it would have over 4, but of course it does not. That being said, I'm not a pressure sensitivity guy that's going to sit there and throw down the hammer and say this machine's terrible because it's lacking the pressure sensitivity of some of the other machines. I got to be honest with you, with the Intrig technology and basically the I don't know how the algorithm works to multiply how it feels, but this thing has the Intrig, and it doesn't have any lag, so the latency is not there. You see me zooming in and out, no problem. And this is a pretty big file. This is 300 dpi at I believe 15 by 15 inches. So, the pressure sensitivity is great. The latency isn't there because it's a powered pen. Do I wish that it had the 4,000 levels of pressure sensitivity? Yeah, I'd like to feel that. Um, I work on my desktop machine, which is a Wacom Cintiq 22 HD, and it's got over 4,000 levels. And then my HP product, which is also a Windows 10 machine, it's the ZBook, the newest ZBook, with the 4K screen. It's got 32 gigs of RAM with the i7 processor and dedicated GPU, and it's got 4,000 levels. And this machine, even though it's weaker on paper, with the Intric technology, it's just a fantastic combination. Here, there's that green screen I was talking about. Um, a fantastic combination of screen, slickness, resistance, plus interface, and it's just a great, and sizing too. I had originally looked at the Wacom Mobile Studio Pro as a traveling machine, and it was a very powerful machine, don't get me wrong. But the real issue that I had was the fact that it was limited to 16 gigs of RAM, and that was an issue for me. But this machine in its greater configurations supports, I believe, up to 32 gigs of RAM. So that's the same thing as my HP. That's why I bought that. But we're talking about the Surface today. The only the things that really kind of draw me towards the Surface Pro line, obviously build quality is spectacular, battery life's good. One of the things that I didn't like was the fact that whenever you separate the keyboard, you're losing the functionality of the keyboard, you're separating the GPU, and you're losing the battery. That was a big game changer whenever I went to buy my HP ZBook, because that thing, golly, has the battery inside, it's got the GPU inside, and the Bluetooth, and their keyboard, whenever you separate it, becomes a Bluetooth asset. So you can set it along the side, and it's a real professional machine. Hopefully Microsoft will kind of raise their eyebrow and look at some of the stuff in the marketplace and do that. Now, I understand why they had everything separated, and it has to probably do with thinness, thickness, weight, because the ZBook is a monster. If I take that keyboard off and I just have that computer sitting on my lap, it is heavy. I mean, it's probably 4 or 5 pounds. And you have 4 or 5 pounds sitting on your lap for 3 and 5, 6 hours, it becomes an issue. But, the same thing with the Surface Book. If you have that thing sitting on your lap, it's a 4 or 5 pounder. And just because of the fact you want to keep that battery in there. Brightness on the screen is fantastic. The color saturation is really good. I don't have this thing dialed in terms of a gamut profile, RGB. I just kind of let it fly as it is because it's such a beautiful screen. And again, we're going through this super high resolution. Well, not super high resolution. Super high would be like 600 dpi, but it's rotating. It's doing everything great. There's no real lag at all. And it's just a really good machine. Why did I choose frogs as a subject matter? This particular image is something that I found on the internet. It was a photograph that very similar, but not the same, of 2 frogs, and I just love doing animals, so I use that as a reference to kind of come up with my own composition. There's no underlying political statement here about frogs or anything like that. I didn't put them in a burning forest or anything like that, but what I did was just go in and start pushing and pulling, on these forums, and doing this image basically as an experiment, because I wanted to see, how far I could push the device before it would start giving me some issue. A while back, I had done a really gigantic file for a client because it needed to be big. It was for an all-over print for some apparel, and it was a gigantic, I mean, we're talking like 4 feet by 4 feet image, and it had to be, 600 dpi, and I needed to keep all the layers in it, so I had to work as a PSB file, which is a Photoshop large format. And, that file was absolutely massive, and my home computer, my desktop, was able to handle it no problem. Of course, it's, a Macintosh iMac that is an i7. It's got 3.4 gigahertz, I believe, and 32 gigs of RAM. So of course it's going to handle it. I was able to transfer that image over to my ZBook and work on that no problem. But this machine, I haven't tried to open that file. I couldn't even open it on my iPad Pro, which is kind of funny. I think the image itself is 5.5 gigabytes. I was able. Funny thing is, I was able to actually open it on my 10.5 and manipulate it down to a workable size, but I can't even open it up on my 12.9, which is supposedly have a faster processor. So I don't know, maybe we'll fiddle around with it. But I just wanted to give you guys kind of an inside track of exactly why I did this image and kind of a short overview of the device that I was working on. So right now it's still in the rough sketch phase, color study, and what you'll see me do is after I get done with that, I'll move on to the final line work and just plug in and play in it. It is a long video, don't get me wrong, it's an hour, a little over an hour long, but hopefully you guys enjoy, and like and subscribe, and follow me on Instagram, Mike Clarida, just at Mike Clarida, and definitely comment, and I try to post something there every other day, if not every day, and hit that notification bell, because I do post videos about once a week, or at least I try to, depending on how busy I am. So thank you guys for visiting, and we'll see you on the next one. The video's not over, so continue to watch to the end. There's quite a bit left. Thank you guys, and we'll talk to you soon.